what is Pinealon Peptide? Well, think of your brain having this quiet maintenance crew you've never heard of, and it's just 3 amino acids, these fragments that are called Pinealon. And it's one of the few lab tools that is utilized to help regenerate the brain. And it's this synthetic tripeptide, so it's just 3 molecules, and it's made of glutamic acid, asparic acid, and arginine. And it was isolated and described by Dr. Kovinson at the Peptide School in St. Petersburg, Russia, and is one of the short-active fragments of cortexin. And cortexin is a polypeptide drug used in parts of Eastern Europe, and in its peer-reviewed review of molecules, classifies Pinealon as one of the neuroprotective arginine-containing tripeptides, small enough in theory to slip through that biological membrane that bulkier peptides can't. Because if you think about the blood-brain barrier, not a lot of molecules can make it through. And that's where another peptide that I love when it comes to brain health called dihexa was really unique, because researchers could not figure out how to get any BDNF stimulating agents through the blood-brain barrier, but dihexa did it, as did Pinealon. You want to think of Pinealon not as a sledgehammer, but just as a nice, gentle signaling tool. And where it gets interesting is it doesn't appear to work like a classic drug that blocks a receptor or suppresses a certain pathway. What peptides do is they just gently nudge the body and the genes down a certain pathway. They remind the genes how to encode themselves. And they do that without changing the DNA. All they're doing is expressing this communication network, this pathway. And if you think of your genome as the piano, your cells are the player, and Pinealon is the thought to lean on in the substantial pedal for the genes that keep neurons healthy. So think of it through antioxidant enzymes. They help with survival proteins and serotonin synthesis. And so the Kovinson group in their review of molecules concluded that Pinealon enters the neurons and is presumed to bind histones and RNA to modulate pathways like MAPK and ERK, and affecting P53 and SOD3 and GPX1. All these are built for neurons. And unlike longevity peptides that target the pineal gland or telomeres like Epitalon, what Pinealon does is it addresses the brain, the cortex, the cerebellum, and the hippocampus. At least in the rat models, they looked at the rat cerebellar granule cells, the PC12 cells, and neutrophils, and it showed dose-dependent reduction of free reactive oxygen species. And these are the free radicals that damage cells. They found Pinealon, it reduced necrotic death and modified the cell cycles. And so the authors of this study, they concluded that it also interacts with the genome because of the cell cycle effect. It persisted at concentrations higher than the antioxidant effects. So there's a lot that we do know. So Pinealon, if you think about it, in my practice, Ageless Future, I've been around 22 years. And what we've seen is Pinealon allows people to reset the whole thinking structure in their brain. It's a very gentle reminder. It works on the melopsin receptors in the eyes. And so a lot of people notice better REM sleep on Pinealon. I know Dr. Andrew Huberman, if you listen to his show, he talks a lot about Pinealon. But it actually, we've thought of it more as a nootropic. Early on in Dr. Kovinson's trials, they were taking large masses, these big protein structures from bovine brains. Pinealon just became one of the bioregulators because Dr. Kovinson, he's like the classic version of an artist when it comes to peptides, because he would just break things down into the smallest substrates that have the greatest level of leverage. And he was looking at longevity medicine decades before many other people were. And what he recognized is that in this entire clump of proteins, there's 3 amino acids that really move the needle, and they're very safe, at least documented adverse events. Of course, needle injection site, those are the most common issues that we've seen. This is not an FDA-approved peptide, but because it is a natural agent, there's a lot that can be done. And if you think of it from a signaling perspective, don't think of Pinealon as something that subdues or suppresses a function or activates a function. It's more of a modulator. It gets in there and it tunes up the brain. It helps reset some of the circadian rhythms, especially when used with Epitalon and with Selenk. It does help with the serotonin production, and it also does seem to have this nice effect of calming down the circadian rhythms, or at least reestablishing the circadian rhythms and helping people get better REM sleep. An independent 2026 review of peptides in gerontology, they looked at all these fascinating peptides, but they treated Pinealon as a fascinating preclinical lead, but not as a proven therapy. What we don't know is there long-term safety data. There's nothing validated in human use. We're kind of presuming that just because we can identify the mechanism of action, therefore it must be great for the brain, but we don't know that yet. And so this is where I'm excited, because Pinealon, it does seem to have these neuroprotective effects, at least in peer-reviewed literature that Dr. Cobinson and his team promoted. It was published in Molecules of 2020. And in their peer-reviewed work, they did discover that it reduced oxidative stress and necrotic cell death in neuronal cell cultures. They also found that it helped with neuronal gene expression effects. It increased serotonin synthesis in the brain cortex cultures. It reduced neuronal apoptosis. There's some very interesting things. And then in an Alzheimer's mouse model study, it prevented dendritic spine loss. The spines, these are the tiny branches of neurons that are used to talk to each other, but it did it at a statistically significant level. And so Pinealon, yes, it's positioned to possibly address cognitive decline. That's the thing you and I do not want to have happen. When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. Second best time is today. When's the best time to take care of your brain? 20 years ago, but do it today. And Pinealon has been a peptide that I've used for over 10 years in cycles just to do some housekeeping in my brain. I want to make sure that neuronal wear and tear, that oxidative damage, that loss of synaptic connections, the declining serotonin, I want to make sure that I refresh those supplies. I have noticed that when I use Pinealon, I do seem to function with more sharpness, more clarity. I find that some of my past self would perceive as a catastrophe actually wasn't a catastrophe at all. It was actually an opportunity for me to grow and learn. And I don't think that without being on Pinealon that I would have had that same resilience. Now, this is not a stimulant. It's not a bandage. It's not some miracle tool. In our clinic, we've seen executives in their 50s or 60s who describe their cognition as sharp, but also their retrieval time is improved. So they can retrieve data. They're more creative. They increase their ability to switch from one mode of execution to another. They can go into a leadership meeting, and then they can also be on the innovation floor and developing new technologies. And so this has been very exciting to me. Right now, we don't have any consistent dose or frequency, but what Dr. Cobinson did definitely would pulse these and cycle them. So if getting on Pinealon is something that you'd like to find, and not from a research use only, you don't want to just consult Dr. Google on this. All you need to do is go to Ageless Future, get your comprehensive blood labs ran. This will be the deepest dive that you may have ever had when it comes to your health. And then you can meet with one of our providers and we'll put together a very specialized peptide protocol for you. I'm Regan Archibald. Really appreciate you being on the channel. If you love the show, share it with a friend, family, or loved one. I'll see you on the next video.